Welcome to another episode of DIOTALK. I'm Let's Talk. My guest of the evening is Dr. Kirsten Viola Harrison. Ladies and gentlemen, Kirsten, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm great. I'm happy you're here. To honor to have a doctor in the house. Um, I've been reading your bio on your website, a brief on your new book, and you have such an incredible, amazing journey.
Yeah, it's been a bit wild.
So, like you're a doctor in psychology, but yet
Uh-huh.
so much more. What
Yeah.
inspired you to do what you do?
Well, okay. So I've always been a humanitarian first. I think I got that from my family. My parents both grew up in Europe during wartime back in the day. And it was, my early reading was very much about people who had gone through like crazy situations and had just these innate survival stories. And so that was kind of my indoctrination into, we're on this planet to try to be good humans and help each other out. And then I kind of was going along in life, loved studying languages, was just sort of doing my thing. And that was a way to connect with people all over the world. And then my first high school sweetheart had a lot of really severe trauma. He had been adopted by a very well meaning family, but had experienced 5 years in an orphanage when he was a child and a lot of abuse. And so that was really crazy for me as a 17-year-old to see all the complex PTSD that I had no name for. I didn't know what I was witnessing, yet it became sort of my mission to try to understand more. So I started studying psychology at Georgetown, and I was just kind of on a path to try to help him find some answers. And I think that all my early reading, all of my early experiences kind of led me down that path. And then a couple years later, I was still with him. I was with him for 16 years. I was still with him, but my brother sadly passed in an accident. And so then that just sort of blew my whole world apart. And I started really diving into near death experiences and people who have had profound change in their lives happen when they've had like a cardiac arrest and come back to talk about it. And I started noticing that the people who had really severe trauma were also talking about very similar things about leaving the body, being held in a different like realm by spirits that were very benevolent and protective. And so I just kind of thought, okay, this is what's sustaining to me. This is hopeful. And this is how I can bridge the gap as an ally between the people who are really struggling and trying to find their way and the people who I feel like have gotten this sort of like spiritual transformation and enlightenment, and they're full of joy. And so it got me through the really dark nights of the soul and the really difficult, depressive years following my brother's passing. It got me through a lot of understanding the PTSD I was going through because when you're in a relationship with someone who's had a lot of trauma, the trauma is like a third party in the relationship. And so it's something you can't avoid dealing with. And it's really difficult, and it impacts how children are raised in that kind of environment. So the whole goal is kind of to interrupt those intergenerational like trauma cycles. So in a sort of not nutshell, that's how I got
Yeah.
into all of this. So
Well, I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm
thank
happy
you.
you
Yeah.
found the courage to just go through and overcome that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Reading your story and
Mhm.
your information, you're someone that you're like you're not just helping other people, you also helped yourself. You know,
Yeah.
uh, and that's incredible. That's incredible. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for your efforts and trying to put your part in helping the world. Thank you.
Well, thank you too for amplifying voices and giving people a chance to tell their stories. We all work in this together to get to the point
Yeah,
where we all lift each other one little step at a time. So,
yeah, yes, yes. So you overcame you came personal adversity.
mhm.
You kicked the depression, all the traumas,
Yeah,
but and came out of
yeah,
that hole. You help
yeah.
you're helping others now. What now?
Well, okay. So, first of all, it does require being really patient with yourself through the process and sort of like in using that terminology of lean in. It's like instead of fighting sometimes the dark stuff, just sort of lean in and see what it has to teach you. Like there are always going to be gifts in the trauma. There are always going to be those nuggets of gold that then pull you forward. And for me, those came from a very deep, like listening to my soul and what I was learning from people who had really gone to the edge of really difficult, chaotic situations and then come back with so much order and so much like profound wisdom and insight. So the thing that started, so I was kind of going along in my life. I started having children. I was doing that world. And and then I had stepkids. One of my stepkids had neurodivergence and special needs. So I really got like a crash
Autism?
course in understanding. Well, she's on the spectrum. It's called Miss Smith McGinnis syndrome. So it's like a really
Hmm.
specific genetic syndrome. But
Okay.
she's 20 now. I've raised her since she was about 2. And I mean, I'm divorced now, but she's still totally in my life. And she is cognitively more like 5. And so she'll always stay that way. And I found that the in with her was to, say, if her teachers were going nuts with her behavior, she's like, bopping kids on the head with pencils and mooning the class, if you can believe it. And I was just like, hey, talk to her about like, what is, Elsa from Frozen doing today? Like, talk to her in those terms, get into her world a little bit and captivate her interest. And then she'll lighten up and you can relate. And she also needed a lot of like somatic, like physical kind of like holding and fist pumps. Like she needed a lot of that. So that's how she was wired. And I'm saying this because fast forward, we moved to La Jolla from Phoenix. And we noticed that there was somebody, I didn't know she was unhoused at the time, but there was somebody kind of walking around the neighborhoods in La Jolla, very optimistic and just super like expressive, presenting as Shauna at the time. And my ex-husband was an international tennis pro. And so he was like, hey, I think that this guy could, he looks pretty fit. He could probably have a great tennis match someday. So we kind of left it at that, new to the town. And then all of a sudden, a month later, we went to the grocery store and this person, Sean, was now Shauna, big blonde flowy wig, a pink bikini top, a skirt. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. The psychologist in me is now intrigued. Like, what's going on here? And just as exuberant as ever, in fact, more so. So I talked to the Starbucks barista in the grocery store, and I just said, hey, do you know what she usually has to drink? I noticed she hangs out here a lot. I brought her a drink. We started having a conversation. So a couple months of this happened where I was just kind of saying hi to her when I'd see her, give her I could tell she was a little down and out. Again, didn't know she was unhoused. But I noticed that she always had a flair for different colored outfits. And so I would kind of go through my closet, find something for her. And then one day, it was really late at night and it was pouring rain. And it was 11 o'clock at night. I remember distinctly because my ex-husband was like, why are you going to the grocery store? It's pouring rain. It's 11 o'clock. And I think it must have been dog food or something. So I went and I saw Shauna and she was sitting there shivering in like a bikini top and just shivering. And I was like, light bulb, oh my gosh, she doesn't have shelter. And so I said, Shauna, do you not have a place to go? And she was like, no, ma'am. And I was like, okay, we have to fix this. Like, this is unacceptable. You're such a joy. You're such an incredible force in the community. I mean, she used to teach everybody basketball because she was a collegiate athlete. And so I checked her into a hotel and then I went back into the parking lot and I just cried my eyes out and I called the local paper and I was like, we have to run a GoFundMe. We have to do something, get the word out. This is unacceptable. So we got a lot of community support. I got an angel investor. We got her off the streets. So now we're like 2 years in. Oh, and by the way, for anyone on video, that's who it is behind me on this poster. But 2 years in, I started to panic because the money was running out. And I thought she can never go back on the street. I promised her that. So I said, hey, Shauna, maybe we could like write your story. I know that I wrote a dissertation. I could possibly write a book with you. And then that we could start getting the word out. So I was not aware of how hard that was going to be. We had COVID. I had 3 kids. I had
Wow.
teenagers. I was like, wait a second. I was in middle age, brain fog and menopause. And I was just like, what did I just commit to? However, I made it a mission. So it did take us 8 years, but we just released the book in May. I have housed her ever since on my dime. I mean, it's just sort of been my thing. I'm not going to let her fall through the cracks. It did prove a little too much for my marriage. Not just that, but that was a kind of tipping point because my ex-husband just didn't he didn't have the same kind of heart to support someone outside of our little system that I did. And so it was just like a constant point of contention. So I kind of really put a lot on the line to make sure that I was going to be able to keep Shauna going, because I knew the alternative was dire. Um, so eventually, I've gotten to know Shauna really well. I took her from a little Obama flip phone where she would take and try to push the numbers. And they used to give these phones out to the homeless just so they could make one or two calls. And then
Yeah.
obviously got her the iPhone. I taught her how to text. She's now like a social media queen. She's got 1 million views on
Wow.
Instagram, TikTok. I mean, it's crazy. And I took her to Europe for all of the pride parades, because the other part of her story is she's something called intersex, which is what they used to call hermaphrodite. So have kind of back in the day, like sort of half male, half female, by anatomy, like ambiguous genitalia. And so she was really confused growing up. She just had no idea what was going on. And she grew up in a very Christian home. Nobody talked about any of it. She just knew something was wrong, something was off. And more kind of got revealed to her in college. And then at the same time, as if it couldn't get more complicated, um, she had a schizophrenic break. And so she has schizophrenia. And so she was really struggling with mental illness. When she was on the streets, when she did the slippery slide to homelessness, she had a lot of PTSD from the trauma that happened on the streets. So it's been like a 10-year journey of constant communication, text. So I took her to Europe for 3 weeks to go represent intersex at Pride parades. We went to Euro Pride in Lisbon. We had done World Pride in DC, Paris Pride, London Pride, and then I took her to Iceland because it's very LGBT friendly. And again, she's representing the I, so LGBTQIA, and the I is intersex. And she's just really tried to do her best, even with the haters all the time, to kind of stay focused on educating people what that means and how we should show compassion to everybody, regardless of their situation. And that all the little acts of kindness that she experienced over time really made a huge difference in her life. That person who'd leave a $5 bill or a little bottle of shampoo or something when she was sleeping got her through. You know, the fish shop that gave her clam chowder to warm her soul, or the bagel shop that gave her free bagels every day. Like, these things made a massive difference in her survival. So now we're just hoping to inspire people with, like, her big thing is stay curious, stay open. You're never alone. No matter what you think, you are never alone. And there is always something better about to happen around the corner. Just keep having faith. So yeah, that's how I got all hooked in, though, because
Wow.
schizophrenia is also a form of neurodivergence. They're starting to recognize that. So I think all my experiences, with my first husband, the one who had very severe trauma, living on the streets, and then in an orphanage, and then running away to the streets, and then my stepdaughter with her neurodivergence on the spectrum. I think it all prepared me to kind of see Shauna and synchronistically just know that this was somebody that I could help and we could make a difference. And I feel like that's what we're doing. So
That's awesome. Good for you. Good
yeah,
for him who
yeah,
found able to find, or her, uh
yeah,
people with so much
um,
compassion to help her. I mean,
yeah,
that's tough, living in a world in basically limbo with no assistant, no help, no understanding. What are you? How do
yes,
I go about this? That's tough.
yes,
That can take a lot out of a person. Uh,
yes,
Especially in this world
mm,
that, despite uh what 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 group you're in, everyone is judgmental,
mm,
because you could be
yeah,
LGBTQ community and they still could be judgmental. You could be
yeah,
the black, white, or whatever. It doesn't matter what, they're still
yeah,
judgmental and not
yeah,
understand what someone may be going through in that time.
yeah. Well, I had to have some talks even with her, because as much as she's been in the margins and she's very much a category of one, there's a bit of her that's gotten used to being an island and used to being kind of like, well, I'm special. And then you add the schizophrenia in there that already makes you have delusions of grandeur. And so when something would happen with somebody in the trans community, she would be like, well, that's not me, because I'm truly female and I'm truly male. And they're just like male wanting to be female. And I'd be like, no, Shauna, like, their souls feel completely misaligned with, misgendered. And so then she started, going on a kind of a mission to educate herself about what the struggles were between intersex and trans and how they both are facing so much discrimination. So what is the point of kind of splitting hairs and infighting about territory when like there's so much, that they could combine and get done together? And I think that was a little light bulb moment where she was like, yeah, I need to, I think some of the most scrutinized and marginalized people are African American trans women. And so Shauna can relate to so much of that because of course that's what most people would assume that she is. And
Mm-hmm.
so it can be really dangerous and really violent. A lot of them end up on the streets. A lot of them do have a lot of trauma. And so I think she was able to then get her brain around, okay, like obviously we do much better when we're all together in this as opposed to kind of coming at each thing very separately.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. How is she now in present time? Is she
She,
is she as schizophrenia has gotten better, medicated? Has she transitioned into a role where like more understanding of who's beside her, community wise?
well, okay. So I'll take the second part of that question first. So it took her a really long time to trust. When she got on off the streets and
Mm,
into housing, she was
yeah.
still loitering around. And I would say, Shauna, why are you still outside all the time? You have a home now. And it was like it took her a long time to trust that like this home was going to be there. It wasn't going to go away, that I was still going to be there, that I would meet her needs as promised. And so that was like peeling away these layers and layers and layers. And of course, over 10 years, it's gotten great. So she, as a human being, I would say that she is very, very able to really feel pretty self-actualized at this point. Like she really has let go of a lot of that outward stuff that really held her back and contained so much trauma and so many formidable obstacles. And then because getting someone housed is just the very beginning. There's so
Hmm.
much then that they have to readapt to. She didn't use her kitchen for over a year. And I was like, Shauna, you don't have to keep going to the restaurants and getting their food. Like, let's go grocery shopping. Like, so it was all these different things. And then with her schizophrenia, as an athlete, she's decided that it was just way too much to ask of her body to handle some of these old meds, like the side effects of some of these
Hmm. Hmm.
neuroleptics are just insane, or at least they were back in the day. And so she was like, that's not going to work for me. So she does 12 to 15 miles of walking a day. So it's like a half marathon a day. And she calls it her mood walk therapy, her movement therapy. And it allows her to just sort of like, she can get very agitated with her movements. And it allows her to sort of like, call it out to the air and just sort of, she lives in the desert now. She wanted to move to Palm Springs during COVID. So she can really just let it out at night and not disturb a lot of people. And it seems to really work for her. And I don't know what
Yeah.
chemicals in the brain it's changing, but it's her thing, and she swears by it. And I think she's almost on like 1,000 consecutive days of over 12 miles a day. Like she has these little apps and trackers that she sends me every single day. And even when we were in Europe, she made sure that she got her mood walk therapy. And so during that time, I would go in my room and write, or I'd go see other sites or something. But it was hard. I have to say, being with her, that was the first time I had ever been with her, like, round the
Yeah.
clock.
No,
Obviously,
that was my following question. How are you doing? Because to witness everything, the
yeah,
unfairness, the learning curves, right? The
yeah.
hearing the trauma, like you must have also taken a toll on yourself because you're absorbing that, like
Well,
because
yes.
yeah. No, continue.
So early on, because I've done trauma therapy with really severely traumatized people. So
Yeah.
35 plus years, I've worked with people with dissociative identity disorder, which was used to be called multiple personality disorder. I've worked with like the most traumatized people. And so I did have to take like a 10-year break in there when I was raising kids because it was too hard to hear all these stories of really extreme trauma. And I would have just such compassion fatigue and then come home and give all that energy to my kids and not be triggered by what I had just heard. And
Hmm.
so I did take a break. I think it's really healthy for people to know keep balance. And really important as a therapist or anyone who's in a healing profession, you have to respect the fact that your vessel has to stay finely attuned and very healthy, because otherwise you're no good to the person and they're really relying on you
Hmm.
to be a really safe container. And so I did take that break when I needed to. And then I started segueing into kind of like what we call the worried well, which is sort of, not to minimize it, but maybe parents who are a little anxious about something. It's like, that's very manageable. And I don't take that home at night. I did a lot of women's groups with that. And so it's kind of, I think I took the wellness break that I needed personally. And so when Shauna came along, it became kind of like I was full of energy and life for it again, because and
You're
she, again,
ready.
she's, yeah, and also she's never been my client. I mean, I give her more client hours probably than I've ever given a client, but she's never been my client. She's just a friend that I met on the street. And so it's kind of like this nice distance, because she's fully an adult. She fully lives her life. So I don't feel a sense of responsibility in that way. Or if she's tanking a little, I don't need to go rescue her, but I can just always be there and always be this safety net. And I think that alone has just been so incredibly healing, having someone to be an ally for you, to witness your struggles, but not get too overly invested. So that part has been really great and easy. However, traveling with her was a whole different ball game,
Mhm.
because traveling with her, I saw firsthand the amount of discrimination she gets, the amount of hate, the amount of people kind of like laughing and just can't make sense of her. And then, of course, sometimes she's kind of talking to herself or gets a little loud. And so I had, again, good preparation from my little stepdaughter, because I never apologized for how my little stepdaughter was, because I was like, that's just her. And so I would just smile or laugh, or if people had a kind of a moment of what's going on here, I would just kind of smile like, hey, I know we got it under control. And so it's the same thing with Shauna. I would just redirect her. Like if we were on a hop on, hop off bus in London and she was getting a little animated. Oh, Doc, look at there's Big Ben. And she was getting very kind of like animated. I would just kind of smile with her. And if people were pointing or noticing, I would just smile at them, and I just kind of kept going. And then if there were times that Shauna got really disorganized, I would just say, hey, Shauna. And then it seemed to pop her back, like her prefrontal cortex kind of just went back online. And then she would get really task oriented again. And so there was only one time. I mean, there were a few times that got really tough, but there was one time in Paris, and I sat across from her in a restaurant. We were in a big department store, and I just looked deep into her eyes and I said, I'm exhausted. Like, I'm exhausted by watching everything you have to go through all day. The patience you have is enormous. The joy that you keep bringing, even when people are being so difficult, like, how do you do this? And so I feel like somewhere deep back in her brain, I feel like a little piece of her soul kind of came through and just met me eye to eye and just said, you know what, Doc, it is really, really tiring sometimes. I don't know how I do it either, but I just got to keep going. And just those words from her soul, like, yeah, I am back here. There's this mental illness up front, but I am way back here and I'm seeing it all. And I'm feeling helpless too, but I have no choice. And that moment of like total humanity and connection just made me go, you know what? This is a person totally worth fighting for. Like, I will do this till the end of my days to try to let other people know too. Like, she's not trying to be this way. She's not trying to be difficult. She's not trying to cause too much attention. She's just existing in a world that doesn't understand her, that judges her, and she's existing in a brain that's not functioning like everybody else's. And so the reality is, the best we can do is just be a friend, offer friendship, be neighborly, have goodwill, good intentions. And I feel like it reverberates out to so many in so many different ways. So that's become kind of like how we get through it, how I deal with it.
And it's just thinking here, like that's just one on many, many stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
So true. So true. I could actually tell 1,000 stories about some
Yeah.
interesting moments with Shauna, but every single time I really am met though with just, it's like awe. I'm just in awe. I think had had she, when I first offered her a hotel that night, hey, I could get you
Yeah.
over to that house, see that hotel across the street, let's go check you in. And that was a huge leap of faith on my part, because I'm like, oh my gosh, what if she absconds with all the hotel's things, like, everything's on my card. Like I was like, okay, what am I doing? But then I thought, you know what? This is important. She needs to go in there. And then the next morning I went to kind of just check on her.
Yeah.
And the staff was like, we've never seen anyone like her. She's availing herself of every gym class because they gave her like a gym membership to this gym across the street. She's, having breakfast with all the people. She's having conversation. I was like, I knew it. I knew something inside of me knew that this would be a good gamble to take. And I think that when I first offered her that, she gestured to the heavens like, bless, thank you, doc. And that gratitude also fueled me because there's so many times that people are so angry from so much that's happened in life and they just project so much negativity. And again, maybe sometimes not through any fault of their own, but I think that light energy likes to be around light energy and that attracted. And so I think when I knew she was receiving it in the spirit of like a hopeful, faith-filled kind of moment, it kept me going in that trajectory. So you never know who's watching. You never know who might notice that you're struggling with your groceries and that you go down to pick them up and someone went, wow, instead of that lady getting mad that she just dropped everything, she's actually laughing like, oh gosh, how'd that happen? And that might bring in some help. That might bring in an encouraging energy. So, I mean, this journey's been so crazy that it's like I'm trying to pick out little moments.
Yeah. No, I was saying it's like, you know how many people that are going through what she's going through and don't have the support, and it's one day you're just walking and you find each other. That's incredible.
Yeah. And you know what? I have a chapter in the book called Synchronicities because there are so many people in the town that as soon as I started telling them things in the newspaper, they were like, they were trying to get a hold of me and going, you would never believe I had the craziest synchronistic experience with Shauna. And this started happening a lot. And I was like, okay, I think she's a walking spirit. There might be something to this. So I went out to lunch with one of the guys and he said, I call it a Shauna feel. Every time I'm having a hard day and something's going on, somehow she pops in my head and then weirdly she turns the corner and she's right there. And I heard this over and over from the banker, the baker, like people in town. And so I said, Shauna, I know this happens to me a lot with you, but how do you explain this? Yes. And she said, doc, I really think that I'm open to something much bigger, like universal energy, and it just guides my feet to go in the direction of where I think somebody needs to hear a message and a reminder that we're all in this together. And so she kind of takes it as like a mission or an imperative to then go in front of somebody who might be struggling. And then it's sort of a reminder that we're all connected. We're all going to help each other out. Just stay curious about it and stay open. So she's taught me so much in that regard. It's been a mutual blessing. I had right before COVID, I had gotten a life-threatening diagnosis. It was horrible. And so I had to tell my kids at the time, they got it wrong, but thank God. But at the time they were like, well, you've got a year to live. Like you got to make peace with your life and blah, blah. Wow. And it was horrible. It was so awful. They did a biopsy and they were wrong. The scans were wrong. 3 doctors read the scans and they all agreed with each other. And then the biopsy said something different. So I still do struggle with an underlying condition, but it's nothing like that. And so the most amazingly beautiful gift in all of that was that Shauna showed up for me wholeheartedly. Every day I got texts with Bible verses or, hey, doc, I just read the latest research on this and that. Did you try this? And hey, doc, just sending you a little bouquet of flowers emoji. And I was like, she's become as important in my little inner circle as friends I've had for a lifetime. And because she really has cared. And I thought this is the gift of mutuality that you never realize could happen until you take a chance on somebody. So, that's the unexpected kind of like benefit to just sort of, you open your eyes and you feel like you're in a humanitarian mission together with somebody, you're amplifying people's voices. But that gift of mutuality on a deep level is beautiful.
Amazing. I'm happy. I'm happy you guys found each other.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
It is amazing. And I do have to say, I get really frustrated with our local leaders. I mean, not to, throw shade, but when you
have to throw it, I mean,
oh my gosh, there's a surplus of funding. I mean, we need more funding, but there is a surplus of governmental funding. And I just feel like if everybody kind of, I mean, I have crazy ideas. Like, what if 50 people, I've been doing this all on my own. What if 50 people got together and they all decided to adopt somebody who'd been on the streets and they just follow them through all the necessary steps and whatever for a while? And it is a lot. And I've spent a fortune and it is really difficult. And I am somebody's sole support system most of the time. What if 50 people did that? We could kind of start tackling the problem like one little starfish at a time and make a huge difference. And so I get very frustrated with kind of like, oh, homelessness, yeah, that's just, it's just a big problem. It's really a thorny issue. And it's like, but we could be doing more, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely more to be done, but like, I think once you ask that question, like, why is there so many homeless people? And
Yeah.
you go down the rabbit hole, right? You really go down the
Yes.
rabbit hole
Yes.
because like when you see these individuals, some of them have a lot of mental illness, but why do they
Yes.
have mental illness?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like I want to say a lot of the daily consumptions, the food,
Mm-hmm.
the medication, all these things
Yeah.
that they'll subscribe you to help you have 20
Yeah.
million side effects
Oh,
that
that's very
eventually
true.
affects them in the long run. So like it's just like
Yeah.
before, like I feel like what detains people
Uh,
from helping somebody is the
yeah.
questions. Why? Because at the end we want to
Yeah.
know why. There's no reason why,
Yes.
There's no reason
Yeah.
why what Sheena had to go through as a child. It's she needed
Yeah.
help. She needed assistance. There's
She
no way
did.
she had to go
And
through what she get through.
I know. And what was crazy is that when so part of getting her housed and getting it all in the newspaper, she hadn't talked to her sister or any family in 17 years. Her parents had died
Wow.
young and her older brother had passed away. And so all of a sudden her sister's daughter found the story and she was like, Mom, your brother's alive, like we found your brother. And so that became this huge like crazy reconnection that through the story and getting it out there, all of a sudden we found family. It was not so simple. Shauna still never talked to her directly. I'm the go-between, so I'll send pictures. So Shauna will say, oh, tell her this, I saw this in Paris. And then I'll send her sister Robin like a thing, and then her sister Robin will respond. And that seems to be sort of the safe way for them to interact and go through things. But when I was in the East Coast with Shauna with the World Pride and everything, um, she had been raised out there in her first, I think, like 10 years of life. And so I was like, should we trace all your old steps, all your old neighborhoods, your old schools? This could be kind of interesting. So she was game. And that was where the sister came in handy because I was like, okay, is Shauna just making it up that they went here? Not like she's ever made anything up, but you never know. And her sister would send back, nope, that's it. That's the street. That's the school. And so I was really heartened to know that here, this person that everybody made judgment about living on the streets, living on cardboard that she would get from CVS every night from their boxes, had gone to a really nice private school in Columbia, Maryland when she was younger. She had lived in beautiful neighborhoods. I mean, very modest homes, but like they were beautiful, like little, parks and playgrounds. And so sometimes mental illness and just life struggles and discrimination really can land you pretty quickly in a place where most people start to feel hopeless. And then living on the streets just becomes this endless spiral of like losing hope and not knowing how to get to the next step. And, but she's always been a leader. She was class president when she was in high school. She, in college, she started a basketball program at a different college. And when she was homeless, she became the leader for the homeless outreach team. So she helped the San Diego Police Department identify where there were needs. So there was a leader in her that was always being a leader, even when she had nothing. And so I think just finding people that encourage your natural strengths and encourage your natural kind of like tendencies, even if the rest of society kind of doesn't understand. It's like find your helpers. Find, like Mr. Rogers said, find the
Hmm.
people that are like, hey, I think, maybe there's something here that we could get done together. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
In your whole experience working in the psychologic field, like
yeah.
what is the most thing that shocks you in today's present time? putting Shauna
Mhm.
aside, just looking at an overview of your whole
Yeah.
career and what things have
Yeah.
evolved throughout time, what is that shocker that you're still in this belief that this should have been taken care of a long time ago?
I think just victim shaming and blaming, it just floors me that we can know so much about the veracity of some horrific childhood abuse and situations that happen, and yet somehow the person is still blamed for their situation. They're still blamed for their symptoms and the fact that they couldn't get it together, or why is she still suffering 20 years out? And it's like, oh my gosh, they've been fundamentally altered at such a deep cellular level by how
Hmm.
much trauma they've had and how much they've had to be on survival mode in their bodies since they were tiny, that it's shocking to me that there isn't more compassion, because we have so much more understanding now. We have so many more resources, and people talk trauma now like it's second nature, whereas back in the
Hmm.
day, I started the trauma field in the 80s, and it was still hard to get people to understand that trauma really was so present in so many of the symptoms. And now people seem to talk it like they all know it, yet there's still so much burden that we put on the
Hmm.
victim. And so, and of course, people don't even like the word victim, on the survivor, but they were victimized by a perpetrator, by a system, by a family that couldn't help or that stayed silent or complicit. And so to me, it's like, again, find your allies, find the people that really do understand, that want to help, resources that you feel like work for you, because it's not a one
Hmm.
size fits all approach. Seek out maybe some of the somatic experiencing type of therapies that really deal with what's really been stored in the body. And just know that out there in the world, even in unlikely places, there are advocates. There are people who really are willing to go walk the walk with you. And so
Yeah.
that would be, I hope that message filters through. Like Shauna said, you're never alone. Like, you really are never alone, even in your most despairing. And then if you want to take that in a universal energy kind of way, people who've had near death experiences, sometimes the messages get through when they're at their point of most surrender. And
Hmm.
so when everything is about to give up, like whether it's physiological, psychological, your body is like at that point of maxed out, that's when the bigger messages can come in. And so just stay aware and stay open, you know?
Is there like in your you spoke of life and death situation? Is there any stories you could share with us of people going through that have left you like jaw open
Yeah.
experience?
Well, I mean, I've seen some personally when I worked in a nursing home and I saw people transition. I was at their deathbed, and then I saw
Oh
things like,
wow.
oh, people would say, "Oh, Heavenly Father, take me now," and they were definitely talking to something, and then they died, and I knew that they were seeing something, and it was super vivid. Um, One of my dearest friends has had that experience. She and her mom were in a car accident when she was 5, and she went with her mom to the light down a path. It's called a shared death experience. And at some point, her mom kind of waved and went on, and then she went back and returned into the life, that she has now. And she's profoundly changed. None of her siblings that were in the car had that experience in the light with her mom. And they've all had a much harder time than she has in life, because she knew where her mom was going and that all was well. So I've heard so many stories. They're beautiful. They're so life affirming. People come back so changed. If somebody's had maybe like a lot of addictions and maybe overdose, and that's how they got into like this life threatening situation, they come back and they change their lives because they
Mhm.
know what they've seen, and it's realer than real, and it's vivid, and it's full of joy. And so that has really there's something called the International Association for Near Death Studies, and I would hope that anyone could get on their website, go to their conferences, listen to the stories. There are a lot of MDs and PhDs there too that really have spent their whole careers trying to like understand all of this. I would say though that the most compelling was the very first experience that I ever heard at a conference, and this is right after my brother had passed away. And it was a guy who had come in, because back then, of course, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have any of this open
Mhm.
communication, and his father had been raised in communist China back then, and they never had religion, they never had any kind of access to spiritual talk or thoughts. And his father was on his deathbed and said he saw Jesus. And the son was so moved by that, that the staunch, hard communist dad like saw that as his vision, that he started coming to the conferences in America to try to understand what had just happened. And I was like, okay, that is pretty compelling, you know? And so there's just so many stories like that. And they're just very, very uplifting. And then by contrast, a lot of the people who've had very severe trauma have had a lot of spiritual abuse, where people have tried to talk the life joy out of them, or hurt them in the name of spirit. So their spirituality has been twisted. And I think that bridging the gap between those voices and conversations, because they've had a harder time in life, and the people who've come and seen spirit as more pure, that's come to them in a near death situation, and bridging, having those conversations and learning from each other has been profoundly healing. And there are also a lot of people who, when they've been abused as children, it's horrific to even talk about, but when they've been abused, they have been maybe almost asphyxiated or annihilated and almost did die as a form of control by the perpetrator. And they have also had some pretty profound moments, like angelic moments or safe moments with like a being of light. A lot of people talked about like a lady in blue, but there was like a good lady in blue. And so these kind of like similarities started to just hit me like, wow, something's happening here that really is protective. So if nothing else from this podcast, I would say everybody needs to realize that I have come to the conclusion that something much bigger is always holding and caring for us. It's just become so undeniable in my life. Even with my skeptical ex-husband, I was like, how do you deny that? You know, over and over and over again. So just when you feel despairing, just trust that it's all part of things, and just, you know, keep going, knowing that there is eventually a purpose to it all.
Amen to that. When they have another question, but I want to ask you this first. When they have these near experience, and do they often choose a religion like Christianity to continue their spirituality engagement?
Sometimes, although I will say that most of them talk about it more as energy. There seem to be a lot of energetic shifts that happen to them when that happens, and so they see it more as kind of like this just big energy of light, like this just sort of being. And that's why people use a lot of terms like the universe or whatever. And a lot of this really is verifiable through quantum physics. Like, it's surprising us how many gains we're making in that, to try to understand that it really does verify what a lot of these people are saying. So I have noticed that more people than not have seemed to say that they saw Jesus as a figure versus like a Buddha or somebody else. Like, and that's interesting. I mean, I grew up with many different like experiences with religion. I didn't grow up in one. So I think that does keep me kind of open to understanding all of this. But they don't really come back more religious per se. It really is more of like just an understanding of like the spiritual nature, the guiding nature of some force and field that's unseen, but is really just holding us. And that, I don't know, I feel like anybody can connect into that.
I feel that's true. All the people that I've met that's gone through something like that always come back to that same concept. You know, because religion, at the end of the religion, it's a man-made organization, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And I concur with you.
I mean, and religions also, I mean, faith in general, like having an indomitable faith in something greater, something bigger. Like religions can be beautiful in the way that they tell stories, and the way that, you know, for some people in their family, that is the core that holds everything together and makes meaning. There's all this beauty, but what we're talking about, I feel like transcends, like it's so much bigger. And so, you know, we can all tap into that.
Yeah. I not too long ago, maybe a year ago, so I had a Tony Mansell on the show, which you were on his podcast. It's called Why Not Me World, which is highly focusing on autism. He spreads awareness. He's been doing it for a couple of years now, which he's doing great. I wanted to get your, like, do you have any experience when it comes to the autism world besides your stepdaughter being neurodivergent and whatnot?
Yeah, so funny you say that, and you say that exactly at this time we're talking about energy, because what I do tend to know, I did speak about this on another podcast, as on I think it was like adulting with autism.
Hmm.
That energy is so important to people who are on the spectrum. They can read energy very well, subtle shifts in energy, because so much is always filtered through a different kind of brain, different kind of mechanism. That energy, and that's why I think it's so positive when you come up to somebody like Shauna and you shift the energy and you're like, hey, Shauna, it's like she responds to that. Whereas if a tourist comes into town and throws that beer can at her because they're harassing her, that's going to, of course, change her energy into a not so great state. So energy is super important in with people in autism and on the spectrum. And that's why I think equine therapy. I used to do therapy with the horses, which is funny because I'm terrified of horses. But I worked with somebody as a therapist, and she was the rancher, and then we kind of did a lot of work. And the horses really, really were soothing and guiding because they mirrored back like a calm
Yeah,
energy. And then when I worked with veterans, they weren't on the spectrum, but like veterans would say, "Well, the horse is big enough to take a bullet for me, so I feel safe around the horse." And then that, physiologically they could relax. So I think that there are lots of different kind of theories going around about how that energy works and how that
yeah,
manifests in brains that are wired a little differently. But yeah, that would be my
yeah,
best answer.
yeah. I agree 100% because my son's autistic,
Oh
and
yeah,
he
yeah,
and even putting him to side, I work at a school with autism, and
uh,
their energy. If you don't come with the right energy, you're not gonna have a good day. You know, you have,
absolutely. Yeah,
yes, you have to be,
yeah,
compassionate, active, confident, and
yes,
I believe that even with the horses, I grew up riding
yeah,
horses, and a
yeah,
horse is very sensitive to energy. So if you're
yeah,
nervous, the horse is nervous. If you're confident, the
yes,
horse is confident. If you're
yeah,
overconfident or feel
yeah,
scared, that horse is going to see that. Um,
yeah. That's really interesting that you're saying that too, because I think that so many teachers, they're under so much pressure, even in special needs classrooms or whatever they call
mhm,
them these days. Like they're under so much pressure to have to get certain tasks accomplished that sometimes they forget that their unique gifts have been the fact that they can just be with the person where they are and then
mhm,
create a sense of safety. And, I really wish that people could just realize like everybody's got their own path to learning the certain things that we all learn in this lifetime, and that's a very unique path and it's a beautiful path. And what can we learn from that path, and how, when I'm sensitive to Shauna's energy shifts, we get the most sort of like accomplished in our connection. And even with writing the book, there were times that I just knew she was way too agitated or something to focus. Even when I gave her a task like, Shauna, hey, by next week, I really need that part done, or we need to get this interview done, or could you write a few sentences on this? And it was just like the wrong time. And then 2 hours later, her energy shifted and this whole stream of text would flow through. And I was like, oh my God, that's
mhm.
brilliant. And so I just had to learn to flow with that and not push it and not force it, and just respect where the energy. Again, let's all just show up with compassion, and let's just all show up with like a little bit of understanding and patience. And it's easier said than done. I've had many, and you can probably relate, many very difficult moments trying to get my stepdaughter ready for school, or like the meltdowns and the tantrums and the throwing things. And, that was really challenging and hard. But it's also the same thing as like self care when you're working with a lot of trauma, self care when you're working with that all the time. You need to be able to have somebody where you can get relieved and you can take a little break and regulate yourself,
Yes,
um,
I
so that you can
agree.
come back, you know?
100%. So
Yeah.
what's next? We have the book out.
Yeah.
For those interested, go get it right now.
Yes, please.
What's next? What's next for you, specifically because you're the bridge for these individuals to find a better path and bettering themselves.
Yeah, I think so. My goal is for if something happens to me and I drop dead tomorrow, God forbid, I want Shauna to be able to be self-sustaining. And so, because right now I do still support like every aspect of her life. And so I am loving doing these podcasts, educating people, putting the messages forward of like, you know, goodwill and hope and how people can help in really constructive ways. But my wish would be that it's, and you know, again, Shauna's I have a team. And so we've been able to get a lot of her videos on these bigger platforms and bigger views. But my hope is that she can get to a point where the natural leader in her and the coach in her can come back and really kind of start to take that initiative. You know, I mean, her brain makes it a little difficult to do that, but to take that initiative to be able to, if she's going to walk 12, 15 miles a day, let's get her a sponsor. She walks her Hokas and Nikes to death. Every 2 weeks, I'm replacing her shoes. Let's get someone to say, hey, and look, you know, movement therapy is working for somebody. And so I'm always kind of trying to think of what the next step for her could be. And so also trying to get her message out kind of like in visual form, because I think that she would be great on some sort of a little streaming series or something where it's like, look at how a day in the life of somebody who struggles and all the little pieces that come together to make life possible, including the goodwill of countless community members that just show up in a little way and then move forward. I mean, one of the podcasts I was talking to somebody, they have these new like little, you know, those mini libraries that they have in neighborhoods. Sometimes you can just like give a book. Well, now they have little mini portable pantries. So if someone's struggling, you know, you just have a little can in there with a flip top. And so more and more things like that really do make a humongous difference in people's lives. So if just people can just feel empowered that even just that little thing you do that day that helps somebody else really, really is an important part of the collective. So that's kind of my mission right now going forward, and just seeing how much we can expand all of this, and then how much we can kind of, Shauna, because she's so into education, and obviously I've been in school forever. We were talking with a producer who has done a lot with foster children and getting a path to UCLA through these education pathways. And so we were thinking of maybe working with him to speak at UCLA and talk to the kids about, you know, even with all of this adversity that you feel like you've gone through, Shauna has too. And like, look, she kept going. And so I feel like there's always one more thing that just sort of opens up that then leads to the next path. So you just have to stay open.
Yes. Best of luck.
Yeah. Thank you.
Best of luck. I'm looking forward to, please come back. I'm looking forward to see what happens in the future.
Thank you.
Before we go, please tell the people where they can find you at, where they can find the book. How can they support you? How can they support Shauna? Please let the people know. Okay.
So the book, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you name it. Our website is soulwisesolutions.com. So SOULWISE solutions.com. There's a lot of Shauna's story. Even the mayor of Palm Springs wrote a little blurb on her. We have blogs. We have all the press that we've been in. And then most importantly, her social media is Soulwise Team, TEAM, and on Instagram and TikTok, and just support on those videos. And if you happen to notice that people are giving a judgmental comment or something, just a little heart or a little like, hey, let's all be kind, would just go a long way to just helping the collective kind of create a bigger space of understanding. So we would love the support.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you go follow. Make sure you go support. Show some love. And if you don't have nothing to say, then don't say nothing. But make sure you hit the follow button and you like. Go check out the book. Go get it today. Doctor, thank you once again for joining me and sharing your amazing story. Amazing story about Shauna. I highly appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to see what happens in the future.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I'm out, guys. Yes, it's been an honor. I'm out, guys. Have a good night.